What do O.J. Simpson, Anna Nicole Smith, Robin Leach of Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous have to do with Scientology and my time in Houston, Texas in the early 1990s? Well, this video, I'm going to go into details about my time in Texas after leaving Scientology and how Scientology would not leave me alone after leaving. I think you're going to find these stories interesting. There's photographs that never been seen before. I hope you enjoy it. Stay tuned. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our channel, Scientology Peeling the Onion. My name is Mark Fisher, and we're going to continue our series of stories of what happened to us after we left Scientology for good in 1990. In previous episode that we did, we talked about Janice and her escape from Scientology. We showed you photographs and told the story about how she got away. And there was a separate episode about my escape the first 2 weeks that I was out and what happened to me. But then we ended up in Las Vegas, Nevada, as you may know. And then we did this as the third video that we did. Scientology sends in a spy. And this is when we were here in Las Vegas for the first year, working in the mortgage industry, trying to get our lives going and set up and on, making money and just living life. Janice was pregnant, about to have her son. I was working with Paul and Janice's sister Terry and her husband Fernando in the mortgage industry. Dave LeBeau was sent in, that's him over there in the pink shirt, to infiltrate by Scientology and basically break our company and break us apart. Well, in this upcoming story that you're going to hear right now is what happened to me after Scientology came in and basically broke us up here in Las Vegas in that first year. And I ended up down in Houston, Texas. And this is the Texas story that I've lived 34 years ago. And I was down there for about 2.5 years. This is a story that's going to involve nightclubs, celebrities, rock and roll. And I think you're going to find the stories interesting and entertaining. Now, some of you maybe find this content a little objectionable, and I can understand that because of the type of business that I got involved with down in Texas. But it was a legitimate business. It was making money. And I'm going to go into details about it because I have no problem with what I did back then and what happened. Stay tuned here. Here's our Texas story. Texas was calling to me because I had lost my job here at Las Vegas at City Mortgage. And we went over that in the last video where I got fired basically for getting upset at an employee over not completing a loan that I needed to get done so I could pay my rent. I had been infiltrated by David LeBeau and lots of different things happened, and we covered that in the last video. But I had made a relationship with somebody down in Houston, Texas, and his name was Dallas Fontenot. That's Dallas there on the left with me on the right. Dallas was a nightclub owner down in Houston, Texas, and he was a legendary figure in the nightclub business down in Houston, Texas. The type of nightclubs that he had were topless gentlemen's clubs, and he was an innovator in that industry. Before he had opened up his club called Rick's Cabaret in the 1980s, topless bars and gentlemen's clubs weren't gentlemen's clubs. They were really biker bars with women that were not really that attractive, had tattoos and that type of thing. Well, he brought it to a whole new scale in the 1980s. He decided that we need to do an upscale version for a gentleman's club where the women that came to work at the club would wear long dresses, get their nails done, get their hair done, no tattoos, dress elegantly, a very posh environment where you had bottle service. Back in the day, in the early 80s, that was something new. A VIP room that he set up. And it was a huge hit in the 1980s in Houston, Texas, where the oil boom was going on during that time period. The name of the club was called Rick's Cabaret in Houston, Texas. And it was located in Southwest Houston in the Richmond, Westheimer area of Houston. and it became very famous worldwide. This is the club, the way that it looked back then, on this little side road just off of Richmond Boulevard in Houston. And it was basically, he took this, I forget what it was before, but he basically renovated it and made it into an upscale gentleman's club where you had to pay a cover charge to come in. And, you know, it was much more exclusive than just anything goes. It was so famous that it actually got featured on the Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, which was a television show in the 1980s. It was hosted by Robin Leach. And they came to Houston, and they actually featured Dallas and his partners and their nightclub, Rick's Cabaret, on the show. So it became very famous. That's Dallas on the right, and on the left is Bob Fury, who was the general manager of Rick's Cabaret at the time. Now, the dancers at these clubs and the entertainers at these clubs, they could make lots of money. This is in the 1980s during the oil boom. It was not unusual for a dancer to make over $1,000 a night dancing at the club. The oil boom was going on. There was a lot of money going on, and they got paid to basically entertain and dance for the customers in the club. The club made its money off of the cover charge, the VIP memberships, and the liquor, beer, and wine sales. That was actually tracked by the Texas Alcohol Beverage Control. So you could actually see how your club was doing statistically against other clubs, because all of your sales had to be reported to the TABC, and they could rank you so you could see how you were doing. But they were making millions of dollars a year in this business. And it was all started and created by Dallas Fontenot with Rick's Cabaret. Now, this business became huge in Houston, Texas. There were many competitors, including the Men's Club, the Gold Cup, Treasures. When I went down to visit Dallas down in Houston, before I moved down there were 15 to 20 of these clubs, and they were all competing in Houston, which was the fourth largest city in the United States at the time. And it was big business, you know, bigger than most cities, much bigger than it was in Las Vegas at the time. So it was huge, and they treated it like a business. Dallas ran the company by statistics. We had monthly or weekly managers meetings to go over what was going on in the club. He had drug testing done for all the managers and all of the cocktail waitresses and employees, and not just like, you know, a urine test. I mean, he actually did hair tests, which could tell if you were taking drugs or were doing anything for months at a time. He didn't put up with any drunkenness from any of the employees, and if girls got drunk or whatever, they'd be sent home. He held really high standards for that industry, and that's one of the things that attracted me to it. The other reason that it attracted me was because Dallas was such a great guy. This was a larger than life character. I had already worked for L. Ron Hubbard, who I had considered a larger than life character in Scientology. And then David Miscavige, who was a Lilliputian character, but a big personality. But Dallas Fontenot was one of the most interesting people that I've ever met in my life. He was full of life, full of fun, very, very dedicated to what he was doing. He could be tough with people, but he also was very fair, and he became one of my close friends for many, many years until he passed away during COVID a few years ago, unfortunately. We stayed in touch throughout the years, almost on a daily or weekly basis, either by phone or text. And we had shared the same sense of humor, and we had lots of laughs together, even after I left working for him in 1993 and came back to Las Vegas. The dancers that were working at the club, they could make, like I said, serious money. And many of them, they had no other options really other than just getting a job at a minimum wage job as a receptionist or whatever. Some of them actually went to college and actually got their degrees. And I know several that did do that over the years and used the dancing and used the money they made at the club to help pay for that. Others used the money to basically get started with their life. They were making more money than they could ever make working, like I said, a minimum wage job, and they loved it. And it was like going to a party every night of the week that you went to work. There was a party atmosphere. You were there to put on a show and put on a party, which made it very fun to be at work and be at the club. Because Rick's Cabaret attracted some of the most beautiful women in all of Houston and Texas, Dallas actually had a relationship with Playboy magazine and also Penthouse magazine. And he was able to get something like 19 to 20 girls already by the time I got there in 1991 into the magazines of Playboy and Penthouse. Because of Dallas's relationship with Playboy and Penthouse magazine, he was able to get one of his dancers, Lynn Johnson. She became the 20th anniversary Penthouse pet in 1990, and that's her on the cover of the magazine. And that's not all. You may recognize this woman here on the cover of Playboy magazine. That's Nicole Smith. She started dancing in Houston at Dallas's club, Rick's Cabaret, as well as several other clubs in the Houston area. We're going to go into her story a little bit later, but you may also remember that she got married to this 90-year-old Howard Marshall, who was an oil man in Houston, Texas, and he actually met her in the VIP room at Rick's Cabaret. These are photographs of Anna Nicole Smith. Her real name was Vicki Smith, with Howard Marshall when they were together. But they actually met at Rick's Cabaret, and she worked for Dallas at Rick's Cabaret. Again, more about her story a little bit later in this video. I was brought to Houston, Texas, like I said, when I lost my job here in Las Vegas. Dallas just called me on the phone. I told him I could no longer work for him because I'd lost my job. He said, pack up your stuff, come down here. You can live with me until you get on your feet. I'm going to put you to work down here at my clubs, at Rick's Cabaret. And then he had another club that he had just opened up the year before called the Colorado Bar and Grill. The Colorado Bar and Grill in Houston was the first topless sports bar and grill. It was basically what you see today in sports bars. They didn't exist back in 1990 and 91, particularly in Houston, Texas. There was no cable TV. There was no flat screen TVs. What he created there was a sports bar in an old Stuart Anderson's Black Angus restaurant. And what he did was he decorated it like a hunting lodge. Dallas had been on safari to Africa several times, and he had lots of animals that he had taxidermied, and he displayed them actually in the club, along with sports memorabilia and televisions all throughout the club. And these were old, the old style televisions, so that men could watch sports. There were pool tables, there were pinball machines, there was a bar, there was a pub atmosphere where they could actually enjoy sports, watch sports, and then, of course, they had the dancers there as well, with several stages in the Colorado Sports Bar and Grill. And that was his second bar that he opened up down there, and it had only been open for about a year. So he had Rick's Cabaret, which was world famous, and then he had the Colorado Sports Bar and Grill. Now, the job that he offered me when I came down there was he wanted to make me his marketing and promotions manager. So my job was to promote and market the clubs, both Rick's and the Colorado Bar and Grill, and get customers in the door. And that's what I concentrated on while I was down there. And I actually did a really good job doing that. We'll go into details in terms of what I had to do. But this was a very fun job for me, because I was able to get a lot of customers in here and drive up the statistics and actual the sales of these clubs, which actually endeared me much more so to the owner, Dallas. This is a photograph outside the Colorado Bar and Grill in the daytime. This is a more recent photo. On the left, you can see the big sign there that says Colorado Bar and Grill. Colorado was located on the Southwest Freeway in Southwest Houston, just near Hillcroft, and it's been there on the freeway for years. Like I said, it was an old Stuart Anderson's Black Angus restaurant that he converted. It had a huge kitchen. They served liquor, beer, and wine. Of course, they also served food. And then, like I said, it had the sports bar atmosphere. Here's another photograph from the highway. It was right next to a Hilton hotel. And this is when they were putting up these signs on the side of the building there. You can see the old cars in front of it. This is back in 1992. You can see the satellite dishes on the top. That's how they got the TV signals. That was a new thing back then in the early 90s. Like I said, they had satellite TV, so you could actually get the different sports games, whereas you couldn't get them. There was no cable that had that at that time. There was no streaming services. So a lot of people came there to watch the sports events. We had boxing, like if there was a big fight in Las Vegas, they would show the pay-per-view there, and we would sell out the club for that purpose as well. We also got local sports celebrities into the club. This is the Houston Rockets. That's Ralph Sampson. I met him when he came into the club. We got lots of other pro athletes that came into the club when they came into town to play either the Houston Rockets or the Houston Astros, or the football team at the time, the Houston Oilers. Another famous basketball player that I met, I was a Celtics fan at the time, was Kevin McHale. He came through there as well. And we would just get them. They'd come in and hang out, have a few drinks. This was after whatever their games and when they were in town. Other sports figures that I met was Chris Mullin, who was a famous basketball player for the Golden State Warriors. We met other Houston Rockets. There was a guy named Matt Bullard, who's actually on the broadcast team for the Houston Rockets now. And he was a rookie at the time, and he used to come, and he was dating one of our dancers. And he was a great guy, and we used to hang out together as well. This is me right there. I'm wearing a Colorado Bar and Grill t-shirt, and the t-shirt had zebras wearing pink sunglasses. And it says the Colorado Bar and Grill, and that was the logo for the club there. And my job, like I said, was to go out and hit the streets and get people into the club and get lots of customers in there. Now, one of the ways that we did that was that Dallas had tickets printed up, almost like sporting event tickets, that we would hand out and put on cars and hand out at other clubs, competing clubs, for free cover charge to come into the Colorado Bar and Grill. At that time, the cover charge was $5 a head. But if you had 2 tickets and there was 2 people, you got in for free. And we put them out all over Southwest Houston every night. I had a team of people that would go out and put those tickets on there. They were marked to see if they had the ticket, if they came from me, from putting them out there. So that way I could tell how well I was doing on getting people into the club. Other things that Dallas came up with that I actually executed was kind of like the Scientology field staff member program, but it was for taxi drivers. And nowadays you see this all the time here in Las Vegas, where the clubs will pay taxi drivers to drop off customers at their club. Well, this was a new thing back in 1990, 91, 92. And basically I would go and hit all the taxi drivers in Southwest Houston, as well as at the airports, and give them a book of tickets that they could actually take. If they dropped somebody off at the club, they would give them this tickets with their name written on them. And actually the door guy would verify that they dropped off the people. And we would turn around and pay them the $5 cover charge that normally would come to the club. We would pay it to the taxi drivers. And that got taxi drivers to drop off people at the club. Other ideas that Dallas came up with, we did billboards around town. We did advertising in local newspaper and magazines, and I was involved with that as well. He did a lot of the designing, and then I would make sure that these things got done. And then another funny one that we did too is that we got ping pong balls printed up that had free admission on them with our club logo on them. And he got thousands of these ping pong balls, and we would go to competing clubs. It was kind of like guerrilla marketing, where we would take these ping pong balls and we would just go driving through their parking lot and just throw these ping pong balls out all over the parking lot, so that when people picked them up, they went, oh my gosh, let's go over to the Colorado Club. And it was just another fun way to get customers into the club. And that was my job while I was down there for the 2.5 years, was getting people in the club. This is a manager's meeting at the time. That's Dallas there on the right, and Bob Fury there is on the left, and then 2 other managers. Somebody will recognize Frank Kent there in the back. But this was in the Colorado at the time. I was working for both Rick's and the Colorado for a while doing the promotions. And then Dallas and his partner, he had a partner in Rick's as well as the Colorado. They decided that they were going to split up. So Dallas let that partner take over Rick's Cabaret, and then Dallas kept the Colorado Bar and Grill. And the partner who took over Rick's Cabaret, he eventually took it nationwide. He turned it into a public company that still exists today on the stock exchange. And there are Rick's Cabarets all across the country, including one in the Fort Worth area that's featured in the Landman TV series with Billy Bob Thornton, when his wife takes the senior citizens to the Topless Gentlemen's Club. That's Rick's Cabaret in Fort Worth that they're taking him to. But this was a managers meeting here in the Colorado at the time. That's the Colorado at night. Dallas had lights put up. He loved Las Vegas. That was his favorite city, was Las Vegas. And none of the other clubs looked like this down in Houston. They had different zoning and variances and things that they had to jump through in order to get these lights put on there. So Dallas actually found loopholes that he could get these put on. This was another loophole that he found. He wanted a big Las Vegas neon sign on the freeway there. And so he had this built. And the way that he got around it was that it calls it a plaza, the Colorado Plaza. And that was the way that he was able to then get this neon sign put in there. Now you can no longer do that in Houston. This is a grandfathered in sign that's there, and you can see it when you drive down the Southwest Freeway in Houston. And that was Dallas's idea of what he wanted to do to promote the club. The first promotional event I had to do when I got to Houston in September of 1991 was the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo, which at that time took place every year in February. I think it was late February, early March, at the Houston Astrodome. And the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo is huge. I mean, they have it in the actual football stadium, 65,000 people a night for 18 straight nights. And then they would have not only just the rodeo performers, but then they would have like country music and rock and roll star bands after the performance by the rodeo stars. So the first thing I had to do was go to this Astrodome. Tickets were gotten for me and a couple of our dancers to come with me. And we would go through the Astrodome and hand out those free tickets to come to the Colorado Bar and Grill. And I had to go to 18 straight performances at the rodeo, at the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo. Now, some of the groups that were performed afterwards were Garth Brooks, George Strait, Hank Williams Jr., lots of different country, Alan Jackson, Reba McEntire, as well as some rock and roll groups and stuff like that. So I got to see lots of different rock and roll and pop bands and country artists at the time in the Houston Astrodome during that time period. And we did that every year. This is the other event that took place at the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo the first year. Was they had a huge barbecue cook-off before the rodeo started the night before in the parking lot of the Astrodome. And we're talking thousands and thousands of people. I'd never seen anything like it. Like they say, everything's bigger in Texas. And this is at the barbecue cook-off. Dallas had bought like a cooker, like a big barbecue trailer cooker. And so we did competition barbecue there, and I was there helping to promote it. That's Dallas there in the middle. And to the left of him was his wife, Holly, at the time. And then to the right is Bob Fury, the general manager, with his wife and son. And this was at the barbecue cook-off, and you're going to see several of these things here. And our job was, again, handing out stickers and promotion and that type of thing to come to the Colorado Bar and Grill, and also Rick's Cabaret at this time. There I am in the back with my mullet. I had long brownish mullety hair there at the time. And on the left there with the black cowboy hat was her name was Nan, and she was Dallas's accountant secretary. In the center with the red hair was Dallas's wife, Holly. And on the right is Bob Fury, who was the general manager. There's the barbecue cooker behind there. It looked like, with the wood and stuff like that on it. And then we brought our dancers and girls around to hand out tickets because it was during the day as well as the nighttime. And you can see the big hair. This was the late 80s, early 90s, and that was the style at the time. And the girls would willingly come and hand out tickets and help promote getting people to the club. And there I am in the center there with two of our waitresses. Again, we were handing out tickets and promoting coming to the Colorado Bar and Grill and to Rick's Cabaret for both of them there. Another promotion that we did one time was the University of Houston Cougars, their football team, in the Astrodome there. They invited us to help promote, Houston Cougar football program. And that's me there on the left there. And I'm with Tony Melissa, and she was one of our penthouse centerfolds that worked at Rick's, as well as the Colorado Bar and Grill, and she's a wonderful person. And then there's Tony Melissa in the middle with two of our other entertainers, dancers. There, we're on the actual floor of the Astrodome there, promoting Colorado and Rick's Cabaret, as well as Houston Cougar football. Dallas liked to do billboards, and he liked to do them big. You see these two zebras there. These are stuffed zebras. That Dallas had a zebra farm as well up in Livingston, Texas, because he loved animals and he loved having them. But anyway, these two zebras are they're actually taxidermied, and they're mounted. They were on the main stage at the Colorado Bar and Grill. They actually are up there in that poses, and he decided, let's do a billboard of the girls with the zebras, and then we'll put it up on the freeways in Houston. So this was a photo shoot that we did actually in the club on the main stage, and those two zebras are there. And then we had the girls dress up, and I had to organize that up and get the photographers and get that type of thing done. And that's Candy. That was one of our dancers there, and she's up on one of the zebras. We took professional photographs. We would use these in advertisements, magazines, that type of thing. We also did golf tournaments for both Rick's Cabaret as well as the Colorado Bar and Grill, where we would actually rent out a whole golf course in Texas, in Houston, just for the whole day. And then we would charge the customers to come out and play 18 holes of golf, and some of the money would go towards charity. And the dancers and the waitresses would actually get tipped to be caddies for the different guys that were there that were playing in the foursomes. There'd be four players in each one, and then they would actually tip the girls to come and be their caddies and basically go out and hang out for the day on the golf course. And that's me with one of our dancers at the golf course there. And we did this twice a year. They were very successful financially for the club as well as for charity. We did one for Rick's and one for the Colorado in the fall, and then we did one for Rick's and one for the Colorado in the springtime. And here's like all the shotgun start, we had the golf course, the golf carts, and the girls caddied in the golf carts. And this was a very, very popular promotion that we did at the time. And then what would nightclubs be in Houston, particularly Gentlemen's Club, without rock and roll? This is Guns N' Roses. In 1992, they came on tour to Houston. They were touring with Metallica. And this is back in the Use Your Illusions 1 and 2 album days. And this was in the Enter Sandman Black Album Metallica days. And we actually put on the VIP party for both Guns N' Roses and Metallica. We picked them up at the airport in limousines, brought them to Rick's Cabaret into the VIP room, and I got to meet everyone except Axl Rose, who he didn't come to the party. But one of the perks of doing promotion and advertising for Rick's as well as the Colorado was I got free tickets to go to shows all the time, to go see concerts. I got to see Guns N' Roses. I got to see U2 at the Astrodome as well as in the Summit at the time. Damn Yankees with Ted Nugent. You name it. When they came through town, there were the promoters for the shows. They were regular VIPs at our club. And one of the perks was, hey, you want tickets? I got 2 tickets for you, and we'd be able to go. We put on the backstage party at the Houston Astrodome for Guns N' Roses, as well as for Metallica. There's Metallica back then in that time. And this is the famous tour that they went on where James Hetfield from Metallica, about a month before, there was a pyrotechnic accident up in Canada, and he had burned his arm really badly. But anyway, they were all there, and they did the show at the Astrodome, and we put on the party for them afterwards backstage for Guns N' Roses and Metallica and their crew. And I got to be right backstage with them with both Guns N' Roses and Metallica at that time period. I couldn't ask for anything more at the time. I was 33 years old at the time. I was, had been divorced for a couple of years because my wife wouldn't leave Scientology with me. And so I was single, and I had the time of my life between the sports bar and the sports people I got to see, because I was a huge sports fan, the rock and roll shows, the country shows I got to see. This job was the most fun job I ever had in terms of promotion and doing things and that type of thing. The other perks that we used to get too was all the other nightclubs, just regular, bars and nightclubs in Houston, they all knew who we were. They knew we were the managers at the Colorado and Rick's. It was carte blanche. Literally, I didn't pay a cover charge if I went out, to go to one of these clubs on my night off or whatever. And I would actually come. I became friends with many of the dancers. Now, I was not a promiscuous person. I wasn't in the Sea Org. I basically was a virgin until I got married in Scientology, because the rules in Scientology and the Sea Org is, you cannot have sexual relations before you're married. So other than my wife, I'd never really been with anybody else or had a girlfriend or anything like that. So I was very ethical in terms of that going on. Now, when I went and I started working in Houston, I knew this was going to piss off David Miscavige no end, okay? Because at that point, I didn't really care. I was out and I was free and I wanted to experience life. But I kept my ethics in, to be honest with you. I was not a promiscuous person, right? So I became friends with many of the dancers, and I also became their protector. So we would go out like on a night out, and I would go out with 5 or 6 of our dancers, and we'd go hit the local Yucatan liquor stand nightclub or whatever and go dancing and have a good old time. And we walked right in. We didn't have to pay for any drinks. We didn't have to pay for anything. And we would just go out there and have a good time and then go on to the next club. And if anybody tried to, cause any trouble with the girls, they just would come over to me and I would protect them. So it was definitely a lot of fun. And I really enjoyed my time working down there because of the relationships and the party atmosphere. And this was, at a time when I was still young and I wasn't making a lot of money. There wasn't a lot of money. I wasn't paid a lot when I was working for Dallas. At the time, I remember I started at $125 a day. That's what I got paid to do the promotions. And most I ever made was like about $145 a day by the time I left. And that wasn't a lot of money. The general managers at that time were making about $200 a day. So there was not a lot of money to be made. But, at the time, I got a 1-bedroom apartment, really nice 1-bedroom apartment in Houston, Texas, $350 a month. So it was much cheaper. Gas was like just over $1.50, maybe $1 to $1.50 a gallon. So it was very inexpensive. So it was a great time period for me in terms of being young, having fun, and enjoying life during that time period after the years that I spent in Scientology. One other funny story about a celebrity encounter I had at Rick's Cabaret in the VIP room, because we had lots of celebrities when they came through Houston, come through the club. And you'll recognize this person right here was O.J. Simpson. He came through the club one time when he was doing a broadcast for a football game. And of course, this was before, the unfortunate tragedy with his wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, and the murder. But this was 1992. And he came through the VIP room, and he actually, first thing he did when he got in the VIP room is he went around and he shook hands with everybody in the VIP room and said hello, took any photographs, signed any autographs, got that all out of the way before he sat down with his guests and the different people he was with. And I'd never seen anything like that before. A lot of the celebrities that would come through the club, they didn't want to be recognized, or they'd sit in the corner, or they weren't very friendly. But that was my encounter with O.J. Simpson before the unfortunate tragedy that beset his wife, the murders. Dallas wanted to do a calendar. He was into photo shoots and that type of thing, but he wanted to do a calendar for both Rick's Cabaret as well as for the Colorado Bar and Grill. And I hooked up with this man who was actually doing baseball cards for the different dancers at different clubs in the Houston area. That was his idea for a business, like collectible dancer cards with their professional photograph, information about the dancer. Most dancers, they didn't use their real names. They use a fake name or whatever, but their information and how they, what club they worked at, that type of thing. Anyway, he had a photographer and his wife working for him to take these photographs for the baseball cards. And so I offered up, to see if there were any dancers or girls at Rick's or the Colorado that wanted to be in the baseball cards. And then also we picked the best ones that we would do a calendar that we could sell at the club for both clubs there. And the photographer that was working for the man doing the baseball cards were these people here. On the left there with the long blonde hair, that's Eric Redding. And then over there on the far right, that's his wife, Diva Redding. Eric and Diva Redding is their names. These are photographs. We became really good friends. This is at a Renaissance festival in Houston, another time where we rented a limousine and brought everybody and had a good time at the Renaissance Festival. But Eric and Diva Redding, they not only were, he was a professional photographer, and Diva was hair and makeup, and she had a clientele list in the Houston area that was second to none. As a matter of fact, she actually was friends with Beyonce's mother before Beyonce was ever born or had, her career going. But anyway, Eric and Diva Redding, they also worked for Playboy magazine as talent scouts in the Houston and Texas area, trying to find women who wanted to be in Playboy magazine as models, right? And they were the ones who discovered and got Anna Nicole Smith into Playboy magazine to start with. That cover I showed you earlier of her on the cover of Playboy magazine, that was the first photograph that had been used by her of her, and it was by Playboy. And Eric and Diva, they spotted her in one of the clubs here in Houston at the time. And from the Playboy photo shoot, Guess Jeans or Guess, they spotted Anna, and they wanted to make her their next Claudia Schiffer at the time and make her, their model. And this is a photograph of her as a guest model. And Eric and Diva were Anna Nicole Smith. They were her manager at the time, as well as they got her into Playboy. And you can see here's a couple. This is another photograph of her from her guest modeling days. So she went from working at Rick's Cabaret and the different, clubs in Houston, and meeting Howard Marshall. And then she tried out for Playboy with Polaroids, and Eric and Diva sent them to Hugh Hefner, and she was chosen for the cover of Playboy, and then eventually became a Playmate. But she also got a Guess Jeans contract, and of course the rest is history. She went on and became a very, very famous model and that type of thing. And it all happened in Houston, and that's how I met Eric and Diva Redding. This is Eric. This is when we were shooting the photographs for the calendar and for the baseball cards. There's Eric there behind the camera, and Diva with her long red hair there. She did the hair and makeup. We became very close friends for many, many years. This is at Galveston, Texas, at the beach when we were doing the shoot for the calendar as well as the baseball cards. That's me, and I'm surrounded by three of the girls that we were taking the photographs of. A funny story is that this is Warren Moon, who was the quarterback of the Houston Oilers at the time, and he was a VIP member at Rick's Cabaret. And Eric and I were taking photographs of one of our dancers at a park in Houston in a fountain, like a an outdoor fountain type of thing. And she was in a bathing suit. These by the way, these were not topless photographs. These were actual, in bathing suits or lingerie or whatever. But anyway, she was in a bathing suit at this fountain, and it was just Eric and I there, and he was taking photographs. Next thing we know, we turn around and Warren Moon is standing right there, and he's watching us take these photographs because he was in a building next door, and he saw that we were taking these photos. He came down to see what was going on. So we got to meet Warren Moon at that time. Eric and Diva went on to write a book about Anna Nicole Smith, Great Big Beautiful Doll, and it was a bestseller nationwide. Anna moved on from them as managers, and then when she went off into reality TV land and all that, they had lost connection with her, and she, went, unfortunately, her way with drugs and alcohol and the lawsuits and all that sort of thing. But they wrote a book about Anna Nicole Smith there, and that's how the connection was with Eric and Diva. We remained friends for many years. This is us on a trip to Thailand together. That's Eric there on the left, me in the center, and then Diva. And here we are. This is again in Thailand when we were there eating food. And anyway, they moved on, and we stayed in touch for many years. Eric continued his photography, and Diva, continued doing hair and makeup for many years. Because of our connection with Eric and Diva, Playboy decided that they wanted to do a spread of the upscale topless clubs and gentlemen's clubs across the country. And so they came to Houston, and they actually picked some girls to take photographs from our club at the Colorado Bar and Grill and feature them in the magazine Playboy. You won't believe the magazine cover and the centerfold that was chosen not by us at all, but it was purely by coincidence for this Playboy magazine that was going to feature upscale strip clubs. And here it is. It's Mimi Rogers, former Scientologist, former wife of Tom Cruise, who I was there when Mimi and Tom got divorced up at the International Base at Gold. I was there when David Miscavige orchestrated that whole divorce. And Mimi decided to do a Playboy interview and a photo spread, and she's on the cover of the magazine. And I'll show you the next photo here. You can see down there on the lower left, it says strip clubs go upscale. That's because inside we had 2 or 3 of our dancers that were featured, that were professionally photographed for the magazine, in the same magazine that featured Mimi Rogers, ex-Scientologist. I thought that was a funny coincidence at the time. So I was having a good time. I was working in Houston and life was moving on. I'd been down there for almost 2.5 years, but I was not without the notice of OSA, Office of Special Affairs, or David Miscavige, or Scientology. I knew, like I said, that when I went down there to work, that I'm sure David Miscavige was getting a kick out of the fact that, look at this out ethics, MFer down there. Can you believe it? He's down there, with these topless women in his club selling alcohol and this and that, right? But at the time, I didn't really care. I didn't care it was a legitimate business. There was nothing illegal going on. I was being ethical about the whole thing. And I didn't really care at that time. Like I said, I was young and I was having a good time and I was making money and living my life. But Miscavige could not leave us alone, and he could not leave me alone down in Texas. It wasn't too long after I got down to Houston that he decided to send down Dave LeBeau to visit me in Houston and find out what was going on. Now, we did not know at the time that David LeBeau was a Scientology private investigator or spy when he came down to visit me in Houston. When I took the job down in Houston, David LeBeau was a loan officer at City Mortgage in Las Vegas, working in the same company that we had there in Las Vegas, right? But I hadn't been down in Houston for more than a month. Then the next thing I know, here's Dave LeBeau calling me up saying, hey, Mark, I'm coming down to Houston. Let's get together. We'll have lunch. So I get together with him and we have lunch down in Houston, and he's got this big Cadillac that he's rented, and we go, and make a long story short, he's asking me all sorts of questions because we had disseminated to him about Scientology when we were in Las Vegas, talking to him. We gave him the Dianetics book. We told him that our grief and our upsets was not with L. Ron Hubbard and Scientology, was with David Miscavige and what he did. And of course, that pissed off David Miscavige no end. And he was interested in following up. And Dave LeBeau was involved in a lot of the financial shenanigans that got me kicked out of Las Vegas, including eventually driving me into bankruptcy through the different con artists and con men that they sent in on us at the time. Their goal was to break us up in Las Vegas. Well, obviously, Miscavige wanted to know what I was doing down in Houston, Texas. So David LeBeau came down, and like I said, it seemed very strange to me because he was asking me questions about my feelings towards Scientology, my feelings towards David Miscavige, what was I doing down there? It was very inquisitive, and I spotted him right away. I went, this is odd. What is this guy doing down here in Houston, Texas, checking up on me? He said he was doing a real estate deal. So what do? I called Janice. I called Janice in Las Vegas, and I said, hey, Janice, David LeBeau's down here in Texas asking me these questions and stuff. I said, do you know why he's down here? And she said, no, he's, I have no idea. He said he was going to do a real estate, but he's not even doing any mortgages or real estate stuff here. He's just sort of, working and not doing much of anything. And that's the first time I said to Janice, Janice, I think he's a plant. And in Scientology terms, a plant is a spy. I said, I think he's a plant. I mean, he's trying to asking me all this different information and that type of thing when there's none of his business and it has nothing to do with anything. And sure enough, Janice then eventually checked it out with a mutual friend in Las Vegas that David LeBeau had made friendship with. And we eventually found out that Dave LeBeau was a Scientology private investigator and a spy. But it was when I was down in Texas that kind of tipped us off in terms of what was going on. So that's how we basically found out about David LeBeau, was between Janice and I working this over, and Miscavige trying to keep tabs on us. Then around the end of 1992 and in early 1993, Scientology got their tax exempt status around that time period. And all of a sudden, I was working in Houston, having a good time, but I wasn't making a lot of money. But I was continuing down there. But what did happen was that Janice and Paul Grady, they still were in Las Vegas working at City Mortgage, the mortgage company. And Paul and Janice eventually, they got involved with the company and were able to get an ownership position in City Mortgage from the Las Vegas man who owned the place, off of their sweat equity in terms of working at the place. And they ended up getting a portion of the company and taking it over. Paul called me up and offered me to come back to Las Vegas, because when we were in Las Vegas initially, our commission structure was very low. I mean, it was ridiculously low. I think our commission schedule was like, I got like 10 to 15% of whatever I brought into the company, strictly commission. That was so low, below industry standards. Anyway, Paul was going to raise it up to 35% commission, and that seemed like a big raise. And he also offered to pay for me to move back to Las Vegas, because I had furniture and things like that and expenses to move to come back. Because when I was in Las Vegas, I actually was really good as a loan officer. I brought in a lot of business, but I just didn't make enough money, and eventually got kicked out, like as I mentioned earlier in this video. So Paul was now taking over the company, and he wanted to get me back to Las Vegas to work in City Mortgage as a loan officer. And it would be a nice raise for me. And at the time, like I said, I was working at the Colorado Bar and Grill, and I was only making about $145 a day, which wasn't a lot of money, right? Dallas at the time, he and his wife Holly, they had a new baby, and this is their son Dakota. This is a couple of years later, but they had a new baby. Dallas already had 2 adult grown children from a previous marriage, but Dakota, this is his son Dakota with his wife Holly, was the center of his life and that type of thing. And he, was concentrating on the Colorado Bar and Grill, but he was really concentrating as well on his family life and his new son. And so I could see the writing on the wall. There was no way for me to move up above the general managers that he had there, because they were so good and they'd been there for years. So I didn't really see a big future there. So I decided that, I talked to Dallas about it, and I told him with the opportunity, and he said, yeah, go for it if that's what you want to do. So I ended up going back to Las Vegas and moving back to Las Vegas in early 1993 to go back to work for Paul and Janice at the City Mortgage Company. And then it wasn't shortly thereafter that Janice's sister Terry and her husband Fernando, the money dried up for them down in Australia on the con job that Scientology was running to get them out of the country for the IRS tax exempt status that we talked about in the earlier video. And that opportunity was going away. And so they were going to come back to Las Vegas, and they came back as well. So we basically were going to reconstitute in Las Vegas, back in the mortgage business. And so they paid for me. I got a U-Haul and, dragged my car and stuff back, and went back to work at City Mortgage. So that was the end of my career in Houston, Texas, working for Dallas at the time. But that didn't end our relationship. Dallas and I remained friends until the day that he passed away during COVID. Just a few years ago. As I mentioned before, I would go down and visit him and see him and his son, Dakota, and his wife, Holly. They would come to visit here in Las Vegas. I would come down and visit Dallas and his family, his wife, Holly, and his son, Dakota. That's me standing on the diving board at Dallas's swimming pool. That's me holding one of Dallas's pet parrots at the time. These are different trips. I loved going down to visit Houston, Texas. That's me holding his son Dakota at Dallas's ranch in the Houston area. Dallas had a huge ranch, and obviously, he was a multimillionaire. He did really, really well in his life. But we became, like I said, very close friends. There's Dallas there on the left, his wife Holly and me at his ranch, another time that I came to visit. They also then came to Las Vegas, and I helped them buy a house. And Dallas had a second home here in Las Vegas. So he would come in the wintertime and hang out. And, we were just very, very close. And like I said, we had a shared sense of humor, shared likes, and we were together for a long time. Dallas's son Dakota became a karate champion, in the karate for kids. He actually became like a national champion, and they toured all over the country in competitions. And there's Dallas with his son Dakota at the time. This is here in Las Vegas. And then there's Dallas with his older son, Joseph. And then he had his daughter Michelle from his previous marriage, and this is a few years later. But Dallas, like I said, he eventually, like, his health got the better of him when he got COVID, and he unfortunately did not make it. I still have some of his voicemails from that time period because I loved his voicemails, and I haven't gotten rid of him, but he passed away. And he was, like I said, a larger, not just in physical presence, just a larger in life character. He's the type of person that they could do a movie about him, and everyone would find him interesting in terms of his life story, because it is an incredible story. And so I miss Dallas every day. I miss our phone calls and the text messages and that type of thing. I'm still in touch with his son Dakota. His son Dakota is an attorney in the Houston area. He was an incredible student. He has his master's degree in business, and he's a CPA and an attorney, and he's only like in his late 20s right now. But he's just a great guy. They finally sold the Colorado Bar and Grill. Actually, they took it over when Dallas passed away, and they were running it for a few years. But just this past July 2025, they finally sold the Colorado Bar and Grill to another nightclub organization, a corporation down there, to take it over. And they sold the real estate and the club and the whole business and all that, so that the family could move on, because they really didn't want to run the club business anymore. Dakota wants to be a successful attorney, so they sold that. There is one memento that was in the Colorado Bar and Grill after I left. It actually was there when I was there, but then actually put it up when I left. But it was there for years, and the last time I was down there a few years ago, it was still there. And this was something that Dallas added to the club for me. And he had this dartboard put up and encased in glass, and it's got my photograph from when I moved back to Las Vegas with a beard in the center of it. And then the darts are on my heart. And then there's a plaque at the bottom of it, and it says "Looking for love in all the wrong places?" ? And he put my phone number, my home phone number on the on the dartboard at that time. This is before cell phones, and so that was up there until last time I was there. Unless they probably took it now that it's been sold, but it was up there along with a lot of the other memorabilia in the halls of the Colorado Bar and Grill, and that was Dallas's tribute to me, and it was an inside joke. So I thought that was pretty funny that he did that. That was my time down in Houston, Texas. I still have friendships down there. I still go down to visit. I have other former dancers that they've gotten married. They've had kids. I've been down there for the birth of their kids. I've been there for their weddings. I have a really close friend that I've been friends with her for 34 years. I have other ones that I'm also friends with that, if they watch this video, they know who they are. And I've maintained great relationships. Houston, Texas, and the state of Texas is a great place. Like they say, everything is bigger in Texas. And factually, if I wasn't living in Las Vegas and my mother wasn't here, I'd be living in Texas, because it's such a great place. And there's so many great people down there. So I miss it very much, but my life carries on here in Las Vegas, and we carry on with the Peeling the Onion channel here at Scientology Peeling the Onion. And of course, we're going to continue our story. The next video in this series that we're going to do is what happened when I came back to Las Vegas, and how the company, how Scientology basically, again, tried to destroy the company over the years after we came back and after leaving Scientology. David Miscavige was not done with us. They sent in further spies and further activities to try and destroy us. That's our show for today. I hope you enjoy it. Please subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Just hit that like button and notification button. It really helps us get people to watch the channel and to get the word out there. If you have any questions or comments about this video or any of our videos, go ahead down below, look down there, write your questions. I'll answer them. I'll be happy to answer them. If you'd like to support our channel, you can buy us a coffee. There's a link in the video description below. Click on that. We appreciate the support. It helps us to get the videos out there. Any money that we get, it just goes right back into continuing to do these videos. And if you'd like to become a member of our channel, there is a join button on our channel page. Just go ahead and click on that join button, follow the instructions. Again, it's another way to support our channel, and we really, really appreciate it. That's the show for today. I hope you enjoy it. Janice will be back shortly. She's been on a short vacation in Germany. Until next time, everybody. Bye-bye.